Good evening, everybody. The clock has just struck 6:30, so we will make a start. Before we go any further, though, important point, can I just remind all members and officers, but also advise members of the public who are speaking this evening, please do adjust your microphones and ensure that you can speak clearly into them so that everybody can hear what is being said. We are webcasting this meeting this evening, and the webcasting is linked to the microphone, so that we make sure you get your picture on the screen. It's important that we follow that simple rule. As I say, we are being webcast live and also for subsequent broadcast on the Council's internet site. Anyone is able to watch what we're doing, either now or in the future. By entering the chamber, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. If you have any queries regarding this, if you could speak to one of the stewards, please, in the gallery. As nothing can be done once the webcast has obviously gone out. Can I ask the committee clerk, please, to read out the public announcement?
Good evening. Council members, officers and members of the public are reminded that the use of mobile electronic devices in all meetings of the Council held in public is permitted, but for the use of Wi-Fi services only. If you wish to make or receive a telephone call, you are asked to please leave the meeting. If the fire alarm goes off this evening, which we're not expecting, please proceed down the main staircase out of the front entrance to congregate in Queen's Gardens until you are advised it's safe to return. The members of the committee will now introduce themselves.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Scott, Chair of the Planning Committee.
Heather Cheeseborough, Director of Planning and Strategic Transport.
Councillor Humayun Kabir, Vice Chair of the Committee.
Jason Perry, Councillor for Crome Ward.
Richard Chatterjee, Councillor for Shirley Ward and substituting for Councillor Chris Wright this evening.
Good evening, Jamie Audsley, Councillor in Bensham Manor.
Good evening, Councillor Maggie Mansell, Norbury Manor. Norbury Manor Ward. Substituting for Bernadette Khan. Oh, well, substituting for somebody else.
Matt Carney, Deputy Team Leader, North Team.
Good evening, my name is Pete Smith, I'm Head of Development Management.
Laura Field, Deputy Team Leader, Development Management.
Sharon Tudor, Councillor for Norbury Ward.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Bernadette Khan.
Councillor Sue Winborn, Fairfield Ward.
Councillor Luke Clancy, Coulsdon West Ward.
Margot Rowan, Committee Manager.
And my name's Sean Murphy, I'm the Legal Advisor to the Committee.
Thank you very much, everybody. First item on the agenda, the minutes of the last meeting on the 30th of November. Are those agreed? Agreed, thank you. Apologies, as has been sort of noted as we went round. Councillor Joy Prince is substituted by Councillor Maggie Mansell, and Councillor Wright is substituted by Councillor Richard Chatterjee. Are there any disclosures of interest for the items this evening? No. We have no urgent items, no exempt items and no development presentations. So it brings us on to the 4 items before us this evening. We'll take those in the order. We'll start 6.1 and then move on to 6.3, then 6.4 and then finally 6.2. So the presenting officer on 6.1 is Matt Carney. When you're ready, please, Matt.
Thanks, Chair. Item 6.1, Normanton Park Hotel, proposing the demolition of the existing hotel, the erection of a new flatted block comprising 29 flats with 25 car parking spaces at the rear, accessed off Whitmead Close. The application site comprises a large detached building formerly in use as Normanton Park Hotel. The building fronts Normanton Road and has a small amount of car parking accessed from the front here in an area of hard standing. Site slopes east to west and the rear boundaries with Whitmead Close to the rear, which is a cul-de-sac with a pedestrian access down here to South Croydon Station. The area is predominantly residential in character, but St Peter's Primary School is just off the image here to the south. And the site has a number of protected trees within this area of the site, and we'll come on to them later. We'll turn into some photographs. This view is from Normanton Road, looking north, with the adjacent property in the background and the hotel across the front here. The site has 3 existing vehicular accesses to the hard standing in front of the hotel, and these are all proposed to be removed and will result in an increase in car parking on Normanton Road. Looking in the opposite direction, it's the remainder of the hotel's frontage, and you can see the adjoining property, which is in flatted use. And again, just more evidence of the hard standing at the front of the hotel that's currently used to the driveway parking. An image here from the rear within Whitmead Close, and shows the location of where the 2 proposed vehicular access points will be provided for the new car parking area to serve the residential block. The final image is taken from within the hotel grounds. I think it's helpful to demonstrate the existing and the scale of the existing building, which is in effect the entirety between this point on the image all the way across to the right-hand side here. Moving on to the proposal. Site plan illustrates the T-shaped approach the architects have taken to the new flatted block. Development provides flats that all meet the national space standards, and the vast majority are provided with private amenity space. However, the site does benefit from a large amount of communal amenity space to the rear. The viability of the scheme has been tested, and the scheme provides 9 units as affordable housing, 6 of which are affordable rent, and the overall provision is 31% affordable housing. The scheme has 2 parking areas at the rear of the site, providing 25 car parking spaces. Whilst this is an over-provision of car parking, on the basis that the car parking area does not over-dominate the rear of the site, it's considered acceptable. Some on-street car parking spaces within Whitmead Close to the rear are lost to facilitate access. However, 3 spaces will be created in Normanton Road following the removal of the existing vehicular accesses to the hotel. The tree officer is satisfied with the loss of the lower quality specimens from this rear part of the site, and has recommended conditions that require tree protection measures to be put into place to ensure the protected trees remain on site and are protected during the construction works and beyond. The approach taken is to break up the massing of the front elevation, so the proposal appears as 2 linked blocks rather than 1 lengthy frontage, and it to a certain extent mirrors the existing arrangement of the existing building. The approach also introduces these 2 prominent gable features, which is also supported on the basis that front gables are also prominent on a number of neighbouring properties within the street. The proposal works with the topography of the site to deliver a building that respects the height of the neighbouring properties, as illustrated here on the image at the top. It's considered the approach taken is successful in reducing the dominance of the building and ensuring the proposal is not out of character within the street scene. The image at the bottom just sets out the rear elevation here, and I think the thing really to note about that is that it's subservient to the remainder of the development and provides high quality accommodation. This slide just sets out the 2 side elevations of the proposed development, and ultimately the thing to say about that is that it's considered that subject to the details of privacy screening to the balconies, the development will not have an unacceptable impact on neighbouring properties by reason of overlooking. I'll leave you with the final slide that demonstrates how the building would appear in the street scene in the top, taking into account the topography of the site and the proposed change of land level. Overall, the proposal is for an attractive, well-designed building, providing 29 flats and making an important contribution towards affordable housing and the provision of family-sized units within the borough, and therefore the recommendation is for approval.
Thank you very much. Questions or clarification? Councillor Perry, did you want to ask about the school grounds?
Just with regard to the the school next door, and the school's expanded recently, and as we know, schools are regularly expanding. There's clearly an opportunity here for the school to expand into that green space. There's limited green space at the school, and I know it's something in the local plan that the site was allocated for. I just wondered, has that been discussed with the school at any point?
So discussions with the school are not as far as I'm aware, but ultimately the site is allocated in CLP2 for residential development and primary school expansion if required. But it's considered that given the extensive dialogue with the applicants and the fact that CLP2 is not adopted, and given the provision of new development, particularly the affordable housing provision, a solely residential use is supported.
Councillor Wimborne.
Could you tell me how much private amenity space there is and what sort of amenity space it is?
The private amenity space is provided in the form of balconies to the vast majority of the units. The remaining amenity space is provided as communal amenity space within the grounds at the rear of the block.
There's quite a substantial area by the looks of the site plan. Do we have an indicative figure at least for the area?
No, I don't have an indicative figure for the amount of communal space, but it would be in effect the area that's shown here on this image, other than obviously the bit that's covered by the car parking and the proposed development.
You mentioned... Oh, sorry, Councillor Chowdhury first.
That's all right.
You mentioned that the parking as proposed was an over-provision. Could you just explain what the thinking is behind that being an over-provision?
It's an over-provision in the sense that, given the PTAL rating, but also the proximity to South Croydon Station and the desire of the London Plan and also the Council to promote sustainable methods of transport, normally we'd seek a reduced number of car parking spaces than what's proposed, but it's considered on this basis that, given the pressures locally and the fact that it doesn't dominate the rest of the site, that the provision is acceptable.
Thank you. And Councillor Chowdhury?
Thank you, Chair. Is there any designated area for the children playing area and within the boundary, and as well as like how many car park allocated for disabled parking, please?
Firstly, in regards to the availability of space for children, there's no particular designation of the land for children, but obviously the space itself is communal and can be used by children without any sort of formal arrangement. In terms of the car parking, the car parking arrangements will meet the requirements in the London Plan in terms of disabled car parking, and that will be secured by condition.
I take it there's no policy requirement then for children's play within a scheme of this scale?
There's the emerging CLP2 provides a requirement for dedicated children play space, but at the present time there's no policy requirement to provide dedicated space.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further questions? Councillor Chatterjee?
Mr. Chairman, children from the proposed flats, if they were playing in the sort of green area, the sort of garden communal area, would they be able to run into the car park at the back, accidentally, for example?
I think, if that is a concern of the committee, then appropriate conditions could be put into place to ensure that, fencing or screening to an extent, obviously, you've got to be mindful of the design impact of that, but it could certainly be provided to ensure that committee's concerns were reassured. Okay, fine.
Mr. Smith?
Chair, if I could just add to the points around the play facilities. I mean, there are three bed units, so there are units suitably sized for families, and I think clearly we've got balconies, but that's probably not going to necessarily work for play for the kids within that family unit. So it would be, and as I say, I've just been looking through the conditions. We could put a condition on to actually identify an area, and with that, we're talking about doorstep play, so it's going to be play for small children, so it's logs and something a bit more informal. But I don't see any reason why we can't put a condition on requiring that to be provided, and we can have that controlled through a condition.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. If there are no further questions, we have 3 people wishing to address us. We have Mr. Waddell, who is a local resident and objecting. We have Mr. Farrelly, who is the applicant's agent, and we have Councillor Neal, who is one of the local referring ward councillors. So I think people are making their way down from the public gallery already. Councillor Neal, yes, you want to move forward? So, gentlemen, each of you in turn will have up to 3 minutes to tell us about your particular perspective on this application. And it's Mr. Waddell first. Are you ready, please?
Thank you for inviting me to speak on behalf of Whitmead Close residents. In the 3 short minutes I have, I'd like to explain why the dozens of Whitmead Close residents who I have spoken to, both individually and as part of large residents' meetings, strongly recommend that this body reject this application because of the unacceptable impacts that it will have on local residents. The first thing to consider is the inappropriate size of the development. Larger than its peers at that end of Normanton Road, it will loom over and dominate the skyline of a large area of Whitmead Close. Whitmead residents are sensible people, and we know that the borough needs more homes, and we would happily support a more sympathetic new development. However, this application would represent a serious overdevelopment of the site. With 4 storeys rather than the previous 2 and the removal of some of those trees, the flats that have higher balconies would loom over some of the residences in Whitmead Close. The second point to note is that there are the number of tree preservation orders on the site affected by the application. These trees, as well as being popular green space, provide a huge amenity value to the road, and they help to screen Whitmead Close from the backs of the buildings, even some of the ones that are already on Normanton Road. Their removal would destroy much of Whitmead Close's green and pleasant aesthetic. The biggest objection, though, is the access route, which, unlike all the other developments on Normanton Road, has been proposed to go through Whitmead Close. This would add around half as much again to the amount of residential traffic through what is a small road. This road, originally designed for only 36 residences, is already crowded, particularly at rush hour times, but is also rammed when the schools are opening, St Peter's School is opening and closing. And this development represents a completely unsuitable burden on Whitmead Close's residents, who already find their road heavily parked most of the time. Furthermore, something that came up in the application before, the strip of land that is planned to be used by this development to access Whitmead Close isn't actually Whitmead Close. It's owned by a third party, Whitmead Management Company, who have no interest in either selling or allowing it to be used for this purpose. Which is why we ask, regardless of whatever development is approved on this site, that access is made, like all the other blocks recently built nearby, to have its access on Normanton Road itself, rather than Whitmead Close. In addition, should the developers wish to use the land that we own, prior to this application being filed, a Certificate B should have been given to Whitmead Management Company. And as far as any of us are aware, the lack of this certificate should, in and of itself, make the application problematic. It's a real shame that this proposal is for a residential site and not education, as the local plan also suggested. Sites for schools are really hard to come by in our area, and there's a big pressure on school places. And an extension to the excellent St Peter's School, the next site along, would have been far superior. We ask that this application is rejected in favour of something more sympathetic.
I'm afraid you'll have to stop you there.
Thank you.
I'm afraid your 3 minutes are up. Thank you very much. And now if I could ask Mr. Farrelly, who's the applicant's agent. You have up to 3 minutes as well. And Mr. Waddell, if you could just turn off your microphone. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillors, thank you for allowing me to address you this evening, and thank you to the planning officers for the handling of the proposal during the determination process. We have considered the planning officers' committee report, including the third-party responses. The proposal involves the demolition and replacement of the Normanton Park Hotel, with 29 flats contained within 3 separate blocks in compliance with local policy. The height, massing and density are all respectful of adjacent properties with appropriate separation distances maintained with all shared boundaries. These design provisions are all supported by the planning officers. An affordable housing viability assessment was carried out by the applicant and was subsequently agreed by the Council's financial consultant and planning officers, which concluded that affordable housing provision is supported and meets planning policy. An extensive pre-application process was undertaken in 2015, along with ongoing dialogue with Croydon Council. The resulting final design incorporated the appropriate setbacks with respect to privacy overlooking and daylighting sunlight. The committee report and the urban design team outlined that setbacks from adjacent properties are both adequate and supported. The car park is in fitting with the overall site layout and will incorporate boundary treatment and planting to reduce any impacts on adjacent properties. This is also supported within the committee report. The transport assessment, supported by the Highways Department, outlines that the development will not have an unacceptable impact on the local highway network. A survey identified adequate parking within the local area, which is not a controlled parking zone. 3 additional parking spaces will be gained along Normanton Road from the closure of the 3 front access points, with entrance points provided to the rear car park off Whitmead Close. This, along with the parking strategy and provision, is supported by the Highways Department and planning officers. All Class A and B trees would be retained. As specified by the planning officer in their committee report, the arboricultural impact and method statements will be conditioned to ensure retained trees are not impacted by construction works. A construction method statement will also address works adjacent to preserved trees and general landscaping of the site. This is also supported by the Council's tree officer. A preliminary ecological appraisal was completed and subsequent surveys of protected species conducted over a number of months earlier this year. Appropriate mitigation measures will be incorporated where required, and this is supported by the planning officers. It is important to note that the lead local flood authority support the current information with respect to surface water runoff, subject to further details. In summary, the proposal represents a sustainable form of development supported by Croydon Council planning officers, the lead local flood authority, the Highways Department, the urban design team and the Council's viability consultant. I therefore welcome your planning officer's recommendation of approval.
Okay, thank you very much. And finally, Councillor Neal, you have up to 3 minutes. Thank you.
First of all, I welcome the change to the site. This hotel has been run down and an eyesore to many residents. But once again, proposals of 10 one-bedroom flats and 16 two-bedroom flats outweigh the need for 3-bedroom houses, which in my opinion would be more suitable on this site, and therefore the requirement for a rear access from Whitmead Close would not be required. That aside, this application with 29 flats and a rear car park is an overdevelopment of this site and will have a detrimental impact to the residents of Whitmead Close. It will also have a detrimental impact to the residents in Normanton Road, particularly number 32 and 38, and to date this development has 35 registered objections. The proposal to have a T-shaped footprint disguises the fact that, in truth, this is a very large development of 3 blocks in terms of scale and massing, and will be very prominent even with the extra land mass. Concerns have already been raised over the loss of on-street parking in Whitmead Close and the impact this will have to the surrounding roads. Parking in the area is at a premium, and I do not agree that Normanton Road will be able to take up the extra car spaces as mentioned in the officer's report. Number 58 Whitmead Close and adjacent properties will be severely impacted by the rear car park, and no amount of planting and boundary treatment will alter the fact that there will be increased noise and disturbance for these residents. The proposed layout of the rear car park with formal paths would leave many trees which are subject to TPOs left in an endangered position. The Arboricultural Survey report quotes, "As far as possible, the new building and areas of hard servicing should be located outside of the root protection of areas of retained trees." I am not convinced that the construction of 2-tier ramps would protect these valuable trees and roots. Without careful monitoring by planning enforcement, I feel that this could be a major concern. With any development, the loss of trees and hedgerows is detrimental to the environment and the landscape of the area. The loss of 18 trees is a high number, and I question why most of the trees cannot be retained to safeguard overlooking properties. If planning is granted, can I be assured that where possible that a tree replacement strategy be implemented to mitigate the tree loss. Can it also be ensured that the trees will be checked for protected species before works are undertaken and features used by foraging commuting bats, i.e. tree-lined borders of the site, are retained and incorporated into the proposed development designs of this site? I politely request that this development is refused based upon adverse effect on the residential amenity of neighbours by reason of noise, disturbance, overlooking, loss of privacy and overshadowing, unacceptable high density overdevelopment of the site as it involves backland development, visual impact of the development.
Neil, I'm sorry, but your 3 minutes are up.
Effect of the development of the character of the neighbourhood.
Councillor,
please refuse this application.
Councillor, thank you very much. Your time is up. Thank you. Okay. Do officers have anything further they wish to add?
Officers consider this is an excellent scheme that proposes the redevelopment of a currently empty building to deliver a much-needed range of housing units, including 13 family units. That's 45% of the overall accommodation. It also provides 31% affordable housing within a policy-compliant split. Members will be aware that it's rare that we do actually ever achieve a policy-compliant split. The design is well considered and very respectful of the surrounding context, and the density falls within London Plan Density Matrix guidelines, although members will be aware this is only guidance, and in addition the distances to adjoining occupiers are considerable. As has been recognised by objectors, the site is very well treed, but the specimens of best quality are all being retained, and there'll be additional planting to supplement. And this will also help mitigate the impact on the neighbouring properties. Considerable work has been undertaken with our borough team to come up and prepare proposals around the car parking to make sure that the existing trees that are retained will go forward in good health. In terms of the school allocation, just want to pick up on that point. It was a very relatively late school allocation in the emerging plan, and it postdated the initiation of dialogue with the applicant, which was back in 2015. So officers are firmly of the view it would be unreasonable to insist on this school allocation. And spatial planning have no indication from the school that expansion is actually sought. Overall, we do recommend approval because we think it's an excellent scheme delivering much needed family and affordable housing.
Chair, I'd just like to address the point. A point was raised about the validity of the planning application and whether the right certificates were served. I'd just like to advise the committee on that point that obviously the planning application has been accepted by the planning department. The planning department has validated it. The planning department is obviously therefore satisfied that the right certificates have been completed. And it wouldn't be for this committee to go behind that and to question whether that's been done or not. If individuals do have concerns around that, then they should be corresponding with the planning department about that, and that will be considered. But it would be outside the remit of this committee to question whether that process has been properly followed or not.
Right, thank you for that clarification. Okay, open this to the committee. Councillor Perry, and I'll bring myself in.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I know the site well. It's in my ward of Crowham. It's clearly a development site. In a way, that's a shame because they were fine buildings once, but they are no more, unfortunately. So it clearly is a development site. And Normanton Road has developed into sort of fairly large blocks in recent years, and some of those blocks are quite pleasant. This block, or these blocks, are particularly large, 51 bedrooms, so probably 100 plus people potentially living here. The loss of trees, I think, is an issue at the rear of the site, 18 plus trees to be removed and groups of trees to be removed. And I think there's two key issues here. One is the impact on Whitmead Close, and the other is the potential for the local school. Whitmead Close is a compact estate, a very nicely laid out estate, very nicely landscaped estate, and as you saw from the images, parking is heavy already along the boundary that we're looking at here. To suggest that by closing 3 entrances on Normanton Road, that parking could be moved to Normanton Road seems a little strange to me, to be honest. But I think the impact of the parking and the access at the rear of this development will have a huge detrimental impact on Whitmead Close, and that combined with the loss of trees is going to make that impact even greater. The parking clearly has been put at the back. We've heard it's an oversupply of parking, which is rare. So, but I think the parking could have been accessed from the front. The way the building has been designed, there could easily have been a central undercroft that could have been accessed from the front, so that parking could still have been at the rear, but not at the very rear. So I think this, things could have been done differently on this scheme. I think the other huge missed opportunity is the fact that we have the primary school next door that has expanded in recent years, and with the way school numbers are going could well be asked to expand in the future. Their play space is not huge, and there is an opportunity here that the school could expand into that green space without having so much impact on the trees, etc., and could use that space. So I think it's unfortunate that the school have not been spoken to as part of the application process. And that's been discussed at part of the local plan in the examination, and the inspector hasn't sought to modify that particular site. So I would have thought that that's a fair question to ask of the school. I think access to public transport is not great in this area. At this particular part of Normanton, you're sort of at the top of a fairly steep hill, and I think there will be lots of car movements and car ownership here, which will have that impact onto Whitmead Close. So whilst I would welcome a redevelopment here, whilst I would be happy with blocks of flats going here, because that is the nature of the road on the whole, I think these blocks are particularly large, probably too large, and I think the impact onto Whitmead Close is a particular problem. And I think, as I say, it is a small estate, but it's a very compact estate, and it will really bear down on Whitmead Close, which I think will be a real issue. So I think this is not the right scheme for the site. I've looked at it many ways, and I just think it is an overdevelopment. I think there could be a scheme here, but this is not the right one. So I would like to move that we refuse this scheme tonight as an overdevelopment by dint of its size and massing and the impact on adjoining occupiers in Whitmead Close, and also the loss of opportunity for school provision in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will bring myself in next, and then I'll bring in Councillor Chatterjee. I think the scheme is well designed. I think it makes a sensible use of a site that is looking rather sad at the moment. I think actually the photographs that we saw earlier on did the existing buildings a lot more credit than they would normally deserve. It was obviously a nice sunny day. I was up there a few weeks ago, and they didn't look anywhere near as good as that, I have to say. So a new residential development coming along on this site seems highly appropriate. The form of development fits in with the sort of types of development that happened in the local area. I think with the sort of split or linked blocks type approach will help it fit in with the scale, but clearly is a bigger site than most of the other sites that have been redeveloped in the local area, so you would expect a larger scheme on the site. Clearly, providing this number of homes and this number of affordable homes and a policy-compliant mix of that is going to help go some way towards meeting our housing need. It's a reasonable number, but it's also on a large site. So I think that balance is correct. And as we've heard, it's within the recommended density levels. There will be some impact, some negative impacts. There will be some loss of trees, but as we've heard, all of the Grade A and Grade B, and as you can see from the plans, also you can see on the screen over there, there are some very significant, very large trees that will be retained as a part of this development, and that is very positive to see. So that green bank that you see from Whitmead Close that we saw in the photographs will be largely retained, and there will be a significant buffer between the existing residents on Whitmead Close and the new properties. A very significant buffer in terms of distance for an urban or semi-suburban area such as this, and given those trees as well. The amount of parking is considered to be an over-provision. I think it's positive in sort of areas like this where we can get as close to one parking space per unit. But here we also need to take into consideration that there is relatively close access to the station. It's only 550 metres from a station. This is exactly the kind of site that we need to be getting the greatest benefit from in terms of of providing new housing that is desperately needed. So I think overall, I think the impact on neighbours will be limited. There will be some impact clearly on the road by the additional use, but the additional number of car movements is not going to be so huge as to be unreasonable, I would suggest. And clearly our highways officers have had a careful look at this and feel the same in terms of the ability of Whitmead Close to be able to accommodate that amount of additional car usage. Point around the primary school, this, as we've heard, there is a dual allocation suggested for the site, a potential expansion of school space onto it, but that policy has not been adopted yet. And also, as we've heard, this scheme has come forward significantly before that, the ability of that to be able to come forward. It's an unfortunate fact that schools don't tend to have an awful lot of money to spend these days, and from what we've heard, the school hasn't come forward indicating that it would wish to take some of that land. It still, of course, has the ability to buy some and buy some of the car parking, and possibly, if it was to do so, create a still acceptable scheme with the smaller of the two car parks taken out. I'm sure some local residents wouldn't necessarily agree with that perspective, but that is still an option, although I'm conscious we need to make the decision based on the scheme before us tonight. So I say, overall, I think it's a well-considered scheme. I think the impact will be limited on the local area, and it will provide very much needed new homes. So I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation for approval, but with the additional condition that a play area is incorporated into the scheme. There is family housing on the site, and that appropriate consideration is given to protection between the parking areas and particularly the play area. Maybe not the whole of the grounds, but certainly an appropriate level of buffer should be included to make sure that a safe condition is created. And I'm sure that can be done within the landscaping condition that's currently proposed. So I so move. Councillor Chatterjee and then Councillor Khan.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Yeah, the scheme has many positives, many of which have been enumerated by good self just now. But overall, I think that I agree with the reasons for refusal put forward by Councillor Perry to my left. So I would move to second refusal on those grounds. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Khan?
I'd like to second your proposal of approval, Chair.
So, seconding approval. Thank you. And Councillor Kabir, and then Councillor Chowdhury.
Chair, just to say quickly that I'm going to support this proposal tonight for approval, because I feel that it is a very reasonable application. I'm pleased that the hotelier is not seeking to start another hotel there, so that's a relief. And it will be a small 29 flats. You know, it's very reasonable development, so I'm going to support this.
Thank you. Councillor Chowdhury.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a nice scheme. One thing probably it could have been more family homes, but because it's more one-bedroom properties. But I think the same as well. We need some more single-bedroom, one-bedroom properties for our young people as well, and probably those who will be taking retirement as well. And of course, hotel is additional, existing from hotel to 29 flats, which is quite good and reasonable. Design could have been a little bit much better in color-wise. And apart from everything is okay, so I'm supporting this scheme as well. Thank you.
Okay, fine, thank you. Anybody else? No? In that case, we've got two motions completed. The first of those was for refusal, moved by Councillor Perry and seconded by Councillor Chatterjee on the grounds of overdevelopment, impact on Whitmead Close and the loss of potential expansion of the school grounds. I think that was those reasons? Yeah. Can I see those in favour of that motion, please? 4. And those against? 6. So that motion falls. The second motion was for approval, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Khan. Can I see those in favour? 6. And those against? 4. Right. Okay, fine, thank you. Can we just do that again, just quickly? Sorry. Can I ask those in favour? Please indicate. 6. And those against? Right, thank you. So that is approved. Thank you very much. Okay then, brings us on to the next item for decision, which is item 6.3, 59 Upper Shirley Road, and the presenting officer is Laura Field. So Laura, when you're ready, please. Okay, if we're all powered up, move on, please. Laura, when you're ready, please.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for the redevelopment of the site at 59 Upper Shirley Road for the demolition of the existing building, the erection of a two-storey building for 7 flats, 7 car parking spaces, cycle and refuse store. This first slide is the overview of the site. The site is here. It's currently a detached house with an in and out driveway with parking on the frontage set within a large plot. To the north of the site is Tanglewood Close, and numbers 16 and 17 lie in that position to the north of the site. To the south of the site is Post Mill Close, and numbers 44 and 45 are in this location here. Further to the south-east is Coloma Convent Girls' School. The area is characterised by large houses on large plots. This is the application site. You can see the properties on Post Mill Close here, and number 44 here and number 45. The boundary of Tanglewood Close is here. Just looking to the south, again, of Post Mill Close here, you can just see the windmill and number 44 and number 45. Again, looking north, you can see the property of number 17, Tanglewood Close. Looking from Tanglewood Close to the application site here, and between numbers 16 and 17. You're looking down Post Mill Close here, the boundary of the application site's running along here, and number 44 here. This is the site layout of the application before us this evening. The proposal is for the demolition of the existing house here, outlined in black here, and for the erection of a building for 7 flats, which all meet policy requirements in terms of internal layout and amenity space. The access to the proposal is from Upper Shirley Road into 7 car parking spaces to the rear of the site. That equates to 1-to-1 parking, which is also policy compliant. the proposed layout, whilst it is larger than the existing house, it does maintain that separation between the neighbouring properties and maintains that separation within the character of the area, and whilst maintaining the privacy and amenities of adjoining properties at number 16 and 17 Tanglewood Close and numbers 44, 45 Postmill Close. In this slide is the front elevations and the side elevations of the proposal. The design of the proposal before us this evening takes cues from the existing existing house here, which is outlined in black here. So you have a hipped roof, which again takes the cues from the existing house and Tanglewood Close. There are design features to add interest to the front elevation in terms of the bay features here and the use of bricks and tiles to reflect the character of the area. This is the rear elevation and again the side elevation. The rear elevation does take again those cues from the front elevation and respects the spacing, the massing and design of the prevailing character of the area. The balconies are set within the features of the bay features to protect amenities of adjoining occupiers. The applicant has provided some 3D images of the proposal. So this is the front elevation, the rear elevation. Again, as you can see, the balcony is set within the feature within the roof, and the front elevation within the street scene. Overall, the scheme is a well-designed scheme which reflects the character of the area, protects amenity space and is in accordance with government guidance in relation to floor spaces to provide 7 units. The recommendation is to grant planning permission. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Got any questions for clarification? Councillor Audsley.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation and the kind of communication that was in character. I just, I don't know the area particularly well, so I was wondering if you might describe kind of the character of the other buildings surrounding it. As I looked at it, it just seemed a little kind of unexpected to me, or kind of not quite what I would imagine being in character. So maybe you could just add some context, or in terms of design, etc. Thank you.
The immediate character, there are several large detached family houses, but there is a wider character, for example, the Coloma School, and in the wider Upper Shirley Road, there are recent permissions for flatted schemes at 114 Upper Shirley Road and 1 Shirley Church Road. So there is a mixture of character in the wider road a bit. There is the immediate vicinity of large detached houses, but there are on large grounds, and it is felt, officers do feel, given the spacing and the design features, that this is in character with the area.
Well, I'm actually looking on Google Earth at the moment at the site, and it strikes me that actually, in terms of the built environment, there isn't actually very much character, consistent character in the area, because most of the other houses on that side of the road actually are accessed from the back off all sort of estate roads. So this is quite rare in so much that it actually faces directly onto the road. And also the character, I would say, would it be fair to say that the character of the building is actually sort of quite, it's not that unusual, but it's not sort of particularly traditional sort of look. It has a sort of slightly modern sort of feel to it anyway. Would that be a fair sort of reflection,
yes,
you think?
There's not a uniform character on fronting on Upper Shirley Road. As you said, there are Tanglewood Close that's got a different character with the orientation of the dwellings within that close, and indeed with Postmill, this is a different orientation to the surrounding properties as well.
Chair, if I could just add to that, I think the important thing here, following on from your own comments, is that we wanted to have a property that fronted the street. But as it's flat and it's it's a thinner site than we're used to in these types of situations. But one thing we wanted to focus on is actually have an entrance to the street. So the front flat actually has its own front door onto the street. So it gives that presence. But also, it's because it's a long, thin site, it's saying how do you deal with amenity space? And the way we've dealt with that is through the balconies, but recessed balconies, to give, again, added feature to the frontage and actually give it a presence on the street. And that's very much how we've sought to deal with that. Most of the flats are actually proposed to be accessed from the side, but it's, again, still having a frontage onto the street, which has been important to us.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chatterjee and then Councillor Chowdhury.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Two questions really about building line and about the thoughts from Coloma School. In terms of the building line, is it going to be in front of the current building line, or would it be further back away from the road? And the second question about Coloma thoughts, do we know what Coloma thinks of the scheme, particularly in respect of access and traffic movements, given the narrowness of the road?
In relation to a building line, I think it follows on from the discussion we were just having about the character of the area. This property does stand alone in the street scene along Upper Shirley Road, with properties on Tanglewood Close following the cul-de-sac there, and indeed with Postmill Close. So the proposal, whilst it does come forward of the existing house, there are varying buildings along Upper Shirley Road. In terms of Coloma, as you can see by this aerial shot, that Coloma, one of the entrances is a fair distance from the site here. The current property does have an in-out driveway here, and the proposal is for one access and for the second access to be closed. So in highway terms, we feel it's satisfactory.
Was there actually any correspondence received from the school? Do we know?
Sorry, I would need to check the records for that. We could do that in the meantime.
Whilst doing that, second question from Councillor Chowdhury.
Thank you, Chair. The height of the new building, the new property we just proposed, is how much difference between the next one, the one, I think, 2-story, please?
As we can see by this front elevation, the height does respect the height of the neighbouring property on Postmill Close, so it is a similar height there.
Okay, thank you. Well, if you could continue looking that up, and we've got a number of people wishing to address us on this. Sorry, there are no further questions. Oh, sorry, Councillor Clancy.
Thanks. Planning policy, the direction of travel seems to be to encourage people to use more public transport, but that seems at odds with this development, given the increase in density. So I just wondered if you could give some explanation about the weight in the London plan that is given to PTEL when density is considered. Obviously, the density here is 300 habitable rooms per hectare, and the London plan sets a density up to 250 for this type of site. And as you say, those ranges should not be applied mechanistically, but what weight does PTEL take in that calculation?
As PTEL increases, the London plan seeks for example, higher density around higher PTEL ratings. So there is a link in terms of public transport and linking that to density. In this case, the PTEL is 2, so we feel that 1-to-1 parking is satisfactory, whilst there is a higher than density. The density is higher than set out in the London plan. It is a guide, and the PTEL and parking are satisfactory in this case.
I think if I can add to that, yeah, PTEL is important in terms of density and the density matrix that's put forward by the London plan. But there are other issues, as we know, that we need to consider in understanding what density means, and that's in terms of impact on neighbours, the design of the scheme itself, how it presents itself as a scheme, and how it works overall. So PTAL is only one part of the sort of density matrix understanding. And I think it's worth noting, although it's an emerging situation, but the new London plan, which has just been bringing forward, is actually challenging the whole issue of the density matrix, and it's been questioned across London to a certain extent around its significance and how it comes back to your point around not using it mechanistically. And I think that's it's being looked at and being challenged about whether the density matrix is helpful or whether one should be looking at it in a bit more of a fluid way and understanding a place and understanding how a scheme comes forward, because I think the density matrix can lead us into a certain direction without actually looking properly at the scheme and its merits.
Okay, so, Councillor Wimborne.
Could you comment on Unit 1? Is there no amenity space at all for them?
There is no amenity space, private amenity space, proposed for Flat 1, although, as the officer pointed out in the report, there is space for private amenity space, and if it was felt that it was necessary, we could condition that.
Sorry, has it got its private space, or is it not got private space?
Sorry. So on the plan, and the plans put forward, there is no private amenity space, but there is space on the front for that amenity space if we could condition it. So this space here could be private amenity space if it was felt necessary.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, if there are no further questions, we have 3 people wishing to address us. We have Mr Higgins, who's a local resident, who's objecting. We have Mr Mwanza, who is the applicant's agent, and we have Councillor Stranack, who is one of the referring board members. If you'd like to make your way forward, please. Okay, gentlemen, you've all got up to 3 minutes to tell us about your particular perspective on this application. Mr Higgins first, when you're ready, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My rear garden, which is number 39 Postmill Close, which has not been mentioned so far, is the other side of the rear boundary of this property, and the new proposed development, having balconies at the rear from the lounge areas, will cause me a loss of privacy and adverse visual intrusion. Balconies being screened will not prevent any overlooking into my garden or even part of my neighbour's garden, and unless any screening done is high enough to prevent this. So in this respect, with the balconies, there will be overlooking and a loss of privacy to me and my family, reference the UDP policy UD8. I did not buy my property to have a car park close to the side of my garden. This would create noise and fumes from the vehicles. And although there is no mention of it, there must be some form of lighting to light that car park at night. And this could cause light intrusion when sleeping in the rear bedrooms. The fence dividing my property to this development is my fence, and I have to pay for any repairs needed to it. There is a possibility that the fence could be damaged by a vehicle entering into a parking space, and there is nothing shown on the plans to prevent any damage being done to my fence, such as concrete posts, which could alleviate this happening. Within 20 feet of the rear boundary, there are 4 very large oak trees, plus other trees around the side of the property and in the surrounding area. There is a large number of trees, so therefore there is no requirement to have more trees, especially towards the rear of this development. Therefore, I strongly object to this development and ask that you refuse permission of this development. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And then Mr Mwanza, You have up to 3 minutes to tell us about your application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The proposal before you this evening is a high-quality and sustainable scheme which seeks to introduce a total of 7 units comprising 1 3-bedroom unit, 1 1-bed and 5 2-bed units. The application follows an extensive pre-application process culminating in written feedback from officers in July this year. The feedback was followed by several rounds of amendments, and I would like to thank officers for the time they took looking at the various iterations of the scheme. The main changes since the pre-application submission include introduction of a 3-bedroom family-size unit, a more traditional elevational treatment, introduction of glazed openings in the flank walls to provide visual relief, restricted basement accommodation, and more hard and soft landscaping. In conclusion, the proposal is wholly acceptable and would contribute to meeting housing targets in the borough by providing a family-size unit. The pre-application feedback has been taken on board. The proposal would not be excessive and would respect boundary separation distances and make a positive contribution to the area. Balconies would be recessed and screened and would be sufficiently, there would be sufficient separation distances from the neighbouring properties. All units provide sufficient floor space and comply with the London Plan and the technical housing standards. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And finally, Councillor Stranack, you have up to 3 minutes to tell us about your concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. The planning application has caused a significant amount of concern amongst local residents, and it is why the ward councillors have referred it to committee this evening. It is understandable that people have fears about change and the intensification of buildings around their area. However, we recognise the need for additional housings, and we know that schemes such as these are being approved on a regular basis. I'm not going to oppose this development going ahead, but instead would like to highlight the areas which are of greatest concerns to the residents living closest to the site. The first has already been mentioned, which is the rear garden of number 39, which overlooks the site. Now, at the moment, obviously, you have lounges and kitchens looking onto bedrooms of number 39. This is, not the usual for this area. Usually, you have bedrooms looking onto bedrooms at the moment. What I would suggest in this scheme, as has already been suggested, is a higher level of screening around the first floor roof terraces that would block some of the overlooking without affecting the light ingress to the site. So I'd like you to consider that. Secondly, and this relates to the construction period, is the issue of the road outside the site. There is a bus stop almost directly opposite the road entrance to the site. I did bring some pictures. I've only got 3 because just to give you an example of where the bus stop is as opposed to the entrance to the site. The bus stop is on the left of the picture. The entrance to the site is on the right. This is the key bus stop for Coloma School and is very heavily used during weekdays. There's also very little parking restriction along the road, and there's often very questionable parking from visitors to the school and the nearby windmill. The bottom line is the building site here is dangerous without strict controls, and I do not believe that the large number of school children on the pavement, both sides, with buses and site traffic moving around, the situation is currently very unsafe. I would ask the committee to defer in order to visit the site and only approve the application when they're sufficiently satisfied that the building of the and the access to the site will be safe. The
Councillor
third and
Stranick, I'm afraid your 3 minutes are now up.
Okay,
Sorry
thank
about that. We're passing around the photograph here of the bus stop. Okay, thank you. Do councillors have anything further to add? And did we manage to get to the bottom of whether Coloma School had made any kind of comment or objection?
The Coloma School made no objection or representation on the scheme.
Officers believe that this proposal makes an efficient use of land, delivers much needed homes in the borough with a replacement family unit and 6 additional dwellings. The principle of redeveloping existing dwelling to make a more efficient use of land is an accepted part of our emerging plan spatial strategy to deliver growth, and it will help obviously safeguard the greenbelt. The design of the new development is considered in keeping with the surrounding townscape, which, as members have said, is extremely varied. And although the density is slightly above the London Plan density matrix, we've had a bit of discussion about that. Just remind members that under the new London Plan, it is proposed to abolish the density matrix altogether because it's not particularly helpful. And officers are pleased that the GLA is taking a more rounded view in terms of whether development densities are appropriate. The impact on surrounding neighbouring residential properties is not considered significant. Windows in affected properties are secondary and the actual distances are acceptable. In terms of the level of overlooking, it is considered acceptable within a suburban situation, and in addition, landscaping can help mitigate the impact of overlooking, and we can deal with that through a condition. In terms of highways impact, and in particular the photograph with the bus stop. The bus stop is actually on the opposite side of the road. Highways officers have been satisfied that the impact on the highway is negligible. There are clear visibility displays from the entrance that allow clear unobstructed views. So just want to emphasise highway officers have looked at this carefully and they are happy with the highway safety. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I just come in first with a few quick sort of points here? The issue around the overlooking of the objector's back garden. I know it's actually his house is at sort of 90 degrees, but obviously there would be an element of overlooking. There is a reasonable distance between the back of the from the balconies to the actual back garden, but would there be scope for a solid or semi-obscured glass in use as the balustrading to the rear, just to help mitigate the sense of overlooking? Would the landscaping condition ensure that sufficient landscaping to the rear of the car parking is actually put in to provide a decent screen? And could that include potentially a new fence, maybe a doubled up fence, but a fence all the same? And finally, I don't think there's a management plan included within the conditions, but is that a condition that could be included to ensure that make sure that there is no conflict during the construction with school children arriving or leaving near the site?
In relation to the balconies are over 20 metres from the neighbouring property number 39, which is to the rear of the site here, and with landscaping along the strip here, it's officers' view that further obscure glazing on those balconies wouldn't be necessary, but we could condition that if the committee felt that to be so. In relation to the landscaping condition 4 in the papers, we could include boundary treatments and further landscaping to be submitted to enhance that condition, and we can include a construction logistics plan condition given the close proximity to the bus routes and the schools, if we deem that to be necessary.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chatterjee?
Thanks very much, Chairman. I think the parking within the site actually is very welcome in what's been designed, and also it's a very, very thoughtful design. So the actual design of the sets of flats and everything with the parking is obviously very thoughtful, and I thought it was almost like Swiss chalet-like at the back, that view with those kind of recessed balconies that are in operation in this intentions in these plans. But of course, I'm very concerned about the visual intrusion. Of course, the light that's likely to be then in the garden or disturbing the overlooking overall against the dwellers of number 39 Post Mill Close. Noting, of course, the observations that it would, if approved, that some sort of screening or some mitigation measures would be very desirable. Also, we would also want to have, I think, something which might give some succour to the concern of the residents at number 39 Post Mill Close that if there were damage because of vehicle manoeuvres over a period of time, X number of months, X number of years, eventually something like that would happen. So something like that would be a good idea to try and protect 39 Post Mill Close's fence. But I am really quite concerned about the traffic movement angle, and even though there haven't been any representations from Cloma, I wouldn't be surprised if they're not actually aware of the application. And even though the bus stop is actually in a kind of lay-by area on the other side, which at least means that there's less movement for traffic, the fact that vehicles will be trying to move out probably in the same kind of times of day that the Colooma school itself will be populated and depopulated, as it were, from by girls going to the and teachers going to the bus stops on the bus stop on the side of the road. It means that there will be a very dangerous impact there, and I would move that to properly inform ourselves of the nuances of this particular site. I would move for a deferral of decision so that we can actually visit the site, ideally at a time when the school would be being filled or emptied, but I know that may not be possible with diarisation for members. But that's what I would move. Basically, yeah. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Kabir.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, I think it's a well-designed application. It's very reasonable application to. I can't see why I shouldn't be supporting it. I'm going to move for approval on the basis of that. I'm completely satisfied with seeing the traffic, the issues with the photograph, with the bus stop and all that. If worst comes to the worst, maybe if we can, in the management, we can say that unloading the building materials can be avoided this school time or something. So to that effect, if we can add that, if we are allowed to do that, maybe that will be better. But on the whole, as a project, I think I'm going to move for approval.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to second approval. I think I will, though, call for that management logistics plan that you've touched on to be in there as well, and the consideration of the back garden aspects to ensure that we have a barrier there that stops car headlights and things like that, which is quite important. I think we should be conscious. I mean, the garden of number 39 is a large garden. But even so, some level of overlooking to that and some of the neighbours can be mitigated with relative ease through that measure. Also, I would like to suggest that we ask that there is a semi-obscured screening to the edge of the balcony, same normal height, but if it was opaque glass or something like that, wouldn't affect the lighting, and it would help reduce that sense of overlooking to the rear without having a detrimental effect, I would suggest, on the occupiers of the new properties. So, Councillor Green, are you happy with those? I hear what Councillor Chatterjee is saying in terms of a site visit, but we are not highways engineers to go along and try and sort of assess what we think is the level of safety in terms of buses dropping off and picking up opposite the site. I think I don't think that would actually tell us anything that would be informative. I think the important thing is that the management techniques are put in place to make sure there isn't an issue. I mean, very often, obviously, works happen next to schools, and indeed works happen on school sites. whilst the schools are occupied as well. So I think that's, I think with the management logistics plan there in place, that should cover that off very, very well. Make sure that a safe environment is maintained. Councillor Clancy, sorry, did I see Councillor Perry first? Councillor Clancy.
I share Councillor Chatterjee's concerns, and I think the committee could benefit from a site visit to have a look at those public transport arrangements. And as I said before, I do have some concerns about the density, and a site visit would give the opportunity to get more of a feel for the area in that respect. So I would second the motion to defer for a site visit.
Councillor Wimborne. Councillor Perry.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think a site visit would be helpful, not just for the traffic angle, but also from the character angle, because as has been said, there is a very mixed character on this particular road, and I think what's being proposed here is a different mix again. It doesn't fit any of the existing characters, and the site that we're looking at here, in comparison to the rest of the road, is a relatively small site. So I think what can be done here, I think, is a bit more restricted. And I think the building at the moment is being stretched forward and backwards in the site, which is going to have more of an impact on both Tanglewood and Post Mill. So I think the opportunity to actually look at the site would be a beneficial one. So I would support that we go for a site visit.
Okay, fine. Personally, I would say we've got some. Personally, I think we've got sufficient information, but that's fair enough to support that. I think just to say on the character, it is an area where there is, if you look at the site, there is limited actual character from the immediate area. There's limited consistency. The building next door is a sort of slightly folksy sort of design in a sort of 1980s sort of way. But I think this is a site where you could actually successfully have a building that's actually quite significantly different from anything in the local area, and you'd hardly notice. But that's a personal perspective. Anyway, does anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Chatterjee? No, sorry, Councillor Chowdhury.
Thank you. It's not much difference with the sea anyway. Well, I think my opinion is to side with it won't be achieving much, because it's the bus stop is a temporary situation while work will be going on. But apart from this, my concern is like the obscure and some sort of condition you need to put in so nobody can watch, from bedroom to kitchen and this. So this is probably my concern. So we can put some restriction or condition. Restriction to about these issues. And so in that respect, and of course the nice design and everything. So I'm seconding to grant the permission subject to this garden obscure grass condition. Thank you.
I fear I've beaten you to it, but yes, you're supported the application. Thank you. I mean, as I say, beaten you to it, I mean not in terms of seconding approval. Okay. Nobody else wishing to speak? In that case, we've got two motions before us. The first to be completed was for approval, moved by Councillor Kabir and seconded by myself. And then the second was to defer for a site visit to look at the parking arrangements for buses, and sort of drop off and pick up children, and also to look and consider the character of the building in terms of the site and density. So, first of those first, can I see those in favour of approval?
6.
And those against? 4. So that is approved, and the second motion falls. But that is approved with those additional conditions regarding the protection to the garden at number 39 in particular, and also in particular, obviously, the Highways Logistics Management Plan thingy. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Okay, that brings us on to item 6.4, 232 Pampersford Road. And the presenting officer is Laura Field. So, Laura, when you're ready, please. Councillor Chowdhury, are you... we'll take a 2-minute break then, okay? Right. Thank you. 2-minute break, everybody. Okay, Laura, we're all fit and ready.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for the redevelopment of the site at 232 Pamperswood Road, for the demolition of the existing house, the erection of a building for 7 two-bedroom flats and 2 three-bedroom houses, with formation of vehicular access, associated parking and storage, cycle and refuse storage facilities. This slide shows the overview of the site outlined in red. The site is a large detached house sitting within a large plot. The surrounding area on Pamperswood Road is a variety of character, with the blocks of flats and houses. Immediately to the north of the site is Harlequin Court, which is a block of flats with parking to the rear. Immediately to the south of the site is 230 Pamperswood Road, which is again a block of flats with a residential unit, a house at the back, 230A. Further to the south, again, is that pattern of a block of flats to the frontage and residential dwelling to the rear off of Hayling Grove. To the east of the site is Hayling Grove Park, and to the west is Regina Coley School. Further afield are various flatted schemes and individual residential houses. This is the proposal site of the with a detached house. You can just see the corner of 230 Brighton Road, 230 Pamperswood Road here, and the boundary of Harlequin Court here. These photographs give you a to the south of Pamperswood Road running along here. So 3 flatted schemes. You can just see the corner of the garage of the site before us this evening. 230 Brighton Road here, and running along to 2 other flatted developments just to see the variety of design within the road. The photograph here is north of the site, and that is Harlequin Court on the corner of Columbine Avenue. Moving to the rear of the site, so the application site here and the flatted block of 230 Brighton Road. To the other side, looking north towards Harlequin Court. Moving to the rear of the site, and to the rear of the site looking towards 230 Brighton Road here, you can just see the residential house of 230A, Pamperswood Road here. So this is the layout of the scheme before us this evening. So it's the demolition of the detached house on site for a block of flats on the frontage for 7 2-bedroom flats, and to the rear 2 3-bedroom houses. The access is from Pamperswood Road to 3 car parking spaces at the front, into a car parking area to the rear, 4 spaces here, and a space for the car parking for the houses. The flats and the houses meet all the technical standards, and in terms of layout and amenity space, each individual flat has its own amenity space, and the houses have rear gardens. The layout of the proposal is has the 2-storey element here, which is central to the layout, which respects the form of development in the surrounding areas, and the distances from 230 Pamperswood Road and 234, which is Harlequin Court. So that respects the character of the area and has adequate distance from neighbouring properties to respect amenity. The next slide is the front elevation and the rear elevation. The design takes cues from the surrounding area whilst has an individuality given the wider context of Pamperswood Road. So the scale and massing and height respects the massing of the surrounding properties at 230. As you can see, the indicative layout here, the layout here and the design. The design has cues to add interest to the front of the properties with the use of bays and windows, with the use of stonework, blockwork and clay tiles. To the rear, again, it picks up on these design cues of the hipped roofs here, use of bay features and the 2-storey central element here. Moving to the elevation of the houses to the rear, again respecting the general massing of the dwelling at 230A with the heights and the use of dormer windows in the frontage, which is a feature of the 2 surrounding houses. Thank you, Chair. The recommendation is to grant planning permission.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions or clarification? Councillor Wimborne?
I see that there is a petition. Do we know how many signatories the petition has got?
Uh, 42.
Councillor Bansal and then Councillor Perry.
Yes, could you just run over the amenity space that's available first to the flats and then to the 2 houses, please?
Each of the flats has individual balconies, and to the houses they have the rear gardens here. So each house has an individual balcony.
So where are the rear gardens on the front?
So the houses to the rear here, and then the gardens are here. So the rear gardens are in this location here. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Perry?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Following the same point really on the amenity space and the back gardens of the 2 houses, 3-bed, 5-person houses. The gardens seem very shallow at the rear. is my first question. How big are those gardens?
Just doing those measurements for you.
I do have a scale rule here if you want to borrow it. That's no. One likes to help when one can. You know.
Whilst Pete's scaling away there, my next question was around Hayling Grove. Obviously, there's the footpath that runs at the back here that runs around Hayling Grove. It's not clear to me whether these two houses will have access to Hayling Grove, whether an access is being put in at the back, or whether the existing screening is being kept as is, because it is very well screened there, and it would be a shame if that screening were to be lost.
The access is from Pamsford Road for the vehicular access, and the access for the main entrance of the houses faces the car parking area. There are conditions for boundary treatments and landscaping, so that will be noted.
So is that keeping the existing, or making sure that it's the same as it is at the moment, and there will be no access, pedestrian access?
Yeah. So there's a proposal for new boundary treatments. There isn't a condition about restricting access from Hayling Grove, but if it's felt that it's necessary, we can add that condition.
Okay, and quick question. Oh, sorry.
And the gardens are, so the larger one, so this point here, that one there's 53. And the other one is slightly less at about 40, 45, something like that.
Thank you very much. And quick question from me. In terms of the layout, and a lot of discussion at the moment about the external layouts, to the front there are 3 parking bays proposed. One of those parking bays sits directly to the back edge of the pavement, whereas there is then a circa 5 metre deep planting area next to it and between the other 2 parking bays and the back of the footpath. Would it be within the scope of the current landscaping condition to modify that such that there is a continuous strip, a narrower strip of landscaping adjacent to the footpath, which will help retain the sort of greenness of the street, rather than having this sort of bit where there's the end of a car?
Currently, as drafted, we have details of parking arrangement as specified in condition 2. That could be changed to have details to be submitted, so we could move that into condition 3 and together with the landscaping. So that is in the scope of the application to do that.
Fine, thank you very much. Pete, would you mind just turning your... Thanks, Laura. Okay, then. We have there are no further questions. We have 3 people wishing to address us. No, sorry, 2. We have Mr. Heller, who is a local objector, and we have Mr. Ibbott, who, whilst we fill the time as they make their way down, has travelled here by train from Dorset today. So, No, I'm being advised by our legal advisor that is not a material planning consideration, okay? Despite the fact that that's a pretty daunting journey, I dare say, but it should not have any bearing on your decision this evening. Yeah, indeed. I would assume maybe he is not going to be making it back tonight. Okay, gentlemen. If you want to both come forward, that's it. And you both have up to 3 minutes to tell us about your perspective on the application. So, Mr. Heller first. Thank you. That's it, yes?
Brilliant. Well, as I say, I must thank you all for letting me speak here, and I'm not used to doing all this speaking, so you'll excuse me if I'm a bit nervous and ramble a bit. But anyway, my objections are, as a resident there, the parking area, Pampersford Road, that particular area narrows very much. And because we live in Columbine Avenue, when they built that block of flats, unfortunately, it's not a private road. So it's just an ordinary road that people park. Now, during the night time and that, it's empty, which means that the residents can park there. But during the school times and any other times, people park their cars right the way down into about 75 yards or metres where the actual road goes. And it wouldn't be so bad if they stopped there, but of course they don't realise that the back of it, Columbine Avenue and Fenwick Place, is in fact private parking residence. They park there, causing huge annoyance to the residences. Now, I know that this block of flats there is going to have 9 parking spaces. Well, my expectation is that people usually have more than 2 cars. People in Columbine Avenue have more than 2 cars, and that causes them problems as well. My concern is, the additional parking spaces is going to cause more problems because there's going to be more parking there. We also have the school, Regina College School there, which is basically causes more problems because they have to park right round there. Okay. We also have the buses. There's a bus that goes right opposite Regina College School. There's a bus stop. And of course, people can park on Pampersford Road because there's no stopping it. And what happens with that is, it causes traffic problems at certain times of the day, especially obviously during the rush hour and during the school opening and closing times. So there's a general problem with the parking area. And also, Pampersford Road in general used to be a nice area where there were lots of houses. Now, I understand we need flats. And if you're going to put a block of flats there, to me, that's the worst place to put it in terms of the narrowness of the road there. And it's going to cause more congestion. And also, I just think that there is too many developments in Pampersford Road. I wouldn't object if it was a smaller development, but I realise that there's no money in that. It has to be a bigger development. If it was 2 or 3 houses in there, I could live with that. But when it's going to be more flats, also the amenities, I gather they've all been looked at too, but are there going to be enough amenities there? I don't know. Anyway, as I say, I'm not really good at this public speaking.
Mr. Heller, you've done a very good job, but I'm afraid your 3 minutes have run out. But thank you for making those points very clearly. Thank you very much. And now if we can move on to Mr. Ebbett. Yes, please. You have up to 3 minutes to tell us about your application.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak. This scheme we've developed, we believe, is a high-quality and sustainable scheme with a sort of traditional aesthetic, and we've sought to harmonise with the neighbouring properties in the street. It provides 2 3-bed family homes which are detached and have small gardens. The size of the gardens, I dispute, they're a bit bigger. They also include a certain part of the front garden area, so it's probably 20 square metres in addition to those figures that were quoted earlier. And there are 7 2-bed flats, each of which have a private balcony. There's also some general amenity space in the back behind the car parking. It looks a sort of a narrow, long strip of grass and trees. The scheme has evolved through pre-app consultations with both case officers and urban design officers, And it's been, in the process of the design development, it's been reduced in scale and the access has been improved, and we believe that there have been aesthetic improvements around the relationship to the street. On the question of objections, there have been a lot of objections, but essentially it's all come from Gulliver Court, which is I believe it's an elderly person's accommodation, slightly removed from the site. It's not opposite the site, it's further up the road. And my local intelligence tells me that most of the parking problems caused there are caused in the delivery, pick-up and drop-off at the two schools that are very locally placed on either side. And there's a lot of inconsiderate parking in Gulliver Court caused by that. And I think also there's a cattery or a sort of kennel-type property 2 doors down, which also causes problems. They've got no off-street parking properly, so that does cause a certain amount of disruption, I'm told. But I don't think it's caused by any of the flats. And there have been no objections. It's notable to note there's been no objections from either of the properties that are probably most keenly affected, which are the flats on either side. And I think there's been one further objection from the owner of the house at 181, which is immediately opposite, but there's no specific points raised in that. The main objection seems to be around parking and traffic, and that the scheme that we produce has been fully vetted with the case officer and with the highways in order to produce the scheme. I think we'd probably like to put 1 or 2 extra parking spaces on ourselves, but that's beside the point. I mean, there's a room to do it. But, so I think that's probably it. There's been a lot of mention about overdevelopment in the objections, but I think that all is to do with the parking situation. I don't think, I mean, from the schemes you've seen posted in sort of bulk and size, it matches the adjoining properties, certainly in footprint on the site. There was some concern in some of the objections about loss of trees and so on.
Okay. I'm afraid your 3 minutes are now up. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Okay. Do the officers have anything further they wish to add?
Thank you, Chair. This is a proposal that makes much more efficient use of land in terms of delivering additional units. It's 8 new additional units, and please note they're all family units. In terms of the scale and massing, scale and massing proposed is all in keeping with the flatted neighbouring developments. Overall, members will be aware that the street demonstrates quite a varied character, and the current property has no great architectural merit. There's good spacing on either side, so residential amenity of the surrounding properties should not be compromised unduly, and there are generous separation distances. On the issue of parking, we've effectively got one-to-one parking. It's quite a generous level of parking in respect of acknowledging the relatively low, well, the low P-TAL. Bear in mind also there is a bus service that runs down Pampersford Road. And highways are satisfied with the number of spaces on site and the safety and the access and egress of the site. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Opening to the committee. I'll go first. I can't see anybody indicating. I think it's a well-designed scheme. I think it is very much to be welcome to see the 9 family-sized homes coming forward. It does fit with the character of the immediate area, even indeed the 2 houses to the rear. I think the one-to-one parking provision is to be welcomed. Hear what the objectors say about parking, but I think provision of 1 space per unit here is a good level of provision. And it's actually not actually the case that everybody actually has a car either. Every family has a car, so it's quite possible that even if some of the housing has 2 cars, they could all still be accommodated within the site. So I think the design looks interesting. There's enough sort of variety and interest all round, and I think it will make a very good development. So I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation for approval. Councillor Audsley.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to second.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mansell.
I think, in principle, I can understand that this is actually quite a good use of the site. I do just wonder about the 2 houses at the rear, and it's good to see family houses rather than flats. You know, the drive to develop and allow more family-sized units does mean that we are seeing an awful lot of flats, and so it's really nice to see family-sized houses. But I just wonder if those two houses should front onto the road behind. I don't know what it's called. It's a ward boundary there, and I don't know quite where it goes to and where the access is. But I just wonder whether that might be something that could be considered.
Councillor Perry, before we go into that, I would just say that we need to make the decision based on the application before us. I think one of the issues might well be, and I don't know that boundary, whether it would be appropriate for there's a gate or an entrance to be on that side as well, or not. I really don't know. Councillor Perry, you may be able to tell us.
I know the path well. It's Hayling Grove, and it's the sort of footpath bridleway round Hayling Grove, which is the local park. There are 2 or 3 properties that do have access, but there is vehicular access, but it's not easy vehicular access, and you have to go right the way across to St Augustine's Avenue to actually access that area. So, which is why I asked the questions earlier, because I don't think it would be appropriate to have access at the rear. And at the moment, when you walk down that path, there's very much a feel that you're in the country. It's a very pleasant green next to the park on one side, and it's very much vegetation on the left-hand side. So I would like to see that boundary maintained and that vegetation maintained on that side, and I wouldn't like to see any more access there. I do have some concerns around the houses and the amount of amenity space. That does bother me to some respect, but I think to change the access would be a detrimental step.
Thank you. Could I just ask Mr. Ibbott, would you mind turning your microphone off? Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay.
I accept that, you know, and thank you for your greater knowledge.
Okay then. Councillor Khan?
I just wanted to say that I'm very familiar with that road too. I drive up and down it every day. And the issue of parking becomes an issue when the schools are, children are going in and coming out. And it's particularly the private school that has a lot of traffic cluttering around it at pick-up time. But beyond that, outside of those times, quite reasonable in terms of the access and, you know, the traffic going up and down. And I do drive up there daily because it's on my way home and on my way out. So I know the area fairly well. And I think also that, you know, the new properties that have been developed there have been of a standard and haven't dramatically changed. I've lived in Purley since the 70s, and I don't feel they've dramatically changed to the detriment of that area. In fact, most of the designs are pretty good. Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I don't see anybody else wishing to speak, so we've got the one motion before us. Crikey, do you know, I didn't write. I moved, didn't I? Yes. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Audsley. Well, it seems like quite a long time ago now. Anyway, for approval, can I see those in favour of approval? And those against? Abstentions? 4. Okay, fine. So that is approved. Thank you very much. Thank you. So that brings us on to the last application for this evening, which is item 6.2. So we can let Lynn finally get home. And it's number 98 Hyde Road. And the presenting officer is Matt Carney. So when you're ready, please, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Item 6.2, 98 Hyde Road, demolition of the existing building and the erection of a two-storey building with basement and accommodation in the roof space, comprising of 2 one-bedroom and 6 two-bedroom flats. Just before I start the presentation, in addition to the addendum report shared with councillors this afternoon, I have a verbal update for this application. 2 further objections were received following the publication of the officer's report. It's not considered that they raise any material issues that are not already addressed within the report, but this does mean that 22 objections in total have been received for this application. The site is situated in a corner plot where Hyde Road meets Copthorne Rise, and the dwelling number 98 here fronts Hyde Road, but does have an existing vehicular access from the rear of the site from Copthorne Rise. Number 98 is elevated in comparison to the highway, and the area generally has a south to north increase in land levels. Important to note that planning permission was granted for a similar flatted development on this site earlier this year. That permission has not yet been implemented, and this application seeks permission for 8 flats rather than the 7 previously approved, but the built form is largely similar to that approved by this committee earlier in the year. Turning to some site photographs, looking north from Hyde Road, it shows the existing dwelling and the subject of the application before us tonight. And it's proposed to demolish this property, and I think the photograph is useful in illustrating the change in land levels given the elevated position in contrast to the road. Turning to a second image, and one taken from Copthorne Rise. The view of back across the application site, looking to the south, southeast. The application site, the dwelling subject is here behind the trees. And as you can see, again, there is a land level change within the area. Moving on to taking a photograph within the application site, looking northwards. As you can see, the current host property benefits from a very large rear garden, and at the end of this garden, in front of the photograph here, that the car parking provision for the proposal would be provided. Moving on to the proposal, the site plan demonstrates what is proposed by the applicants. Firstly, the change from the 2016 permission relates predominantly to the depth and width of the rear element of the building and at lower ground and ground floors. I do have a slide later in the presentation that is really helpful in demonstrating that. All of the flats provided within the all the flats provided within the scheme meet the technical housing standards in terms of floor areas and are provided with a satisfactory amenity space. The proposal provides a parking area at the rear of the site for 8 cars, and it's accessed via Copthorne Rise. Important to note that an additional space is provided in the parking area from the previous approval for 7 flats. So now there is 8 spaces to go with the 8 flats that are proposed by the application. Site does benefit from a number of trees, one of which is protected by the council, and detailed conditions are recommended to ensure that tree protection measures are put in place, and hard and soft landscaping is appropriately provided. Turning to the elevation drawings, the top image set out the front elevation of the proposal. I think the most important thing to note is that the proposal demonstrates and continues the stepping down of building heights within Hyde Road, which I think is an important part of the street scene, and also something that's dictated to by the land level change. But the front elevation remains broadly the same as the approved scheme. The image to the bottom is the rear, and again it's broadly similar to the previous approval. You can just make out the beginnings of the larger projection here at the ground floor, which I'll turn to on the side elevations. As the image from the rear demonstrates, the building is well separated from the boundaries of the site, ensuring it has no detrimental impact upon the amenities of neighbouring residents. The final slide provides the side elevation of the building fronting Copthorne Rise in the top image, and a section through the site in the rear. The area that provides the additional floor space is, as I say, is predominantly within this part of the site, and that facilitates the increase, along with some internal alterations, to the increase in flat numbers. The previous scheme had a similar footprint in terms of a basement, and on the basis that the basement provides living accommodation for flats split across the lower ground and ground floors, it's considered that this arrangement provides a satisfactory quality of living accommodation for any future occupiers. To conclude, this proposal would provide 8 new residential units in the borough without having a detrimental impact upon the amenities of neighbouring residents, the street scene or the local highway network, and therefore Office's recommendation is for approval.
Okay, questions of clarification. Just check, so to the casual observer walking past this development when complete, what would they notice as being different? Is it literally the depth of that extension to the rear, and by how much is it extending?
Offhand, I haven't got the details of the depth of projection, but ultimately this flatted, the flat roof part here, it provides the majority of the floor space provided for the additional unit, and also this is a slight further projection here at the front, is slightly projected further out. But obviously, because that's at basement and ground floor levels, it provides additional floor space at both levels.
So hardly any difference at all?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Yeah, no, to the casual observer from Copthorne Rise, particularly given the screening and so on, yeah, I think it'd be a limited impact.
Okay, fine. Any further questions? Councillor Kabir?
Could you please show there where the bean area is, waste?
Yeah, sorry. So the refuse and I believe the cycle storage for the proposal is provided within this part of the site here, in close proximity to the vehicular access, which would be required by our waste management services, and to collect the refuse generated by the development.
Okay, with no further questions, we have 2 people wishing to address us. We have Mr. Mwanza, who is the applicant's agent, and we have Councillor Hale, who is referring ward councillor. So, Mr. Mwanza and Councillor Hale, you both have up to 3 minutes, as you're, I'm sure, both very much aware, to tell us about your particular perspective on the application. So, Mr. Mwanza first, thank you.
Thank you, sir. So this is an amended application, as you've heard. It follows the approval of the scheme for 7 2-bed flats. So the principle of development has already been agreed. It's already been established. In this context, the proposal before you this evening seeks minor adjustments to the approved scheme. There would be negligible change to the bulk and massing of the building. As you've heard, there will be alterations at lower ground level, rear and ground level. But the site will be well screened, and if the 2 schemes were built, I think it would be very difficult to tell the difference between them. An additional parking space is proposed, as well as an additional cycle store. The proposal would maintain the character of the plot, and there have been no highway objections to the proposal. It's considered to comply with the London Plan and national standards in respect of unit sizes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hale?
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate consent has already been granted for a similar flatted development on this site of 7 2-bedroom flats. But I just wanted to raise a few points about this application for 8 flats. The proposal would in fact mean the loss of a 2-bedroom flat, which would be able to accommodate a small family. There are plenty of 1-bedroom flats, but it's accommodation for families which we need in Croydon, and I regret the loss of a unit which could accommodate a small family. It will occupy more of the site than the previous application, with the additional flat roofed stroke lower ground floor rear projection. And with the increased hard standing of 110 square metres, this is of particular concern when the site is located within an area of high risk from surface water flooding. The proposal would also compromise the character of this area, which on the whole has single-dwelling two-storey houses with large gardens. This site will be about 45% concreted over. The application is deeply flawed in a number of respects, with submitted drawings being inconsistent with the descriptions in the application details, and a planning, design and access statement littered with errors relating to both the application and the site. Apparently the site is close to open spaces like Parkfields Rec and Stanhope Grove playing fields, and they're in Bromley. It's also apparently 135 metres from Monk's Orchard bus stops, which as far as I know are miles away. It states a PTAL of 5, but it's actually 2. It refers to 3 stories, but details 4 stories in the table immediately below this statement. They might not be planning considerations, but with these obvious sloppy errors, you wonder how accurate the formal plans and drawings are, and I would suggest they really do fall short of basic standards that you would expect from a planning application, and I'd certainly ask if they're going to be approved that those are thoroughly checked. Whilst I hope you will refuse the application, if you are approving it, I would request conditions be attached around the use of the flat roof, the surface water and SUDS assessment, and a tree protection plan. Finally, it is acknowledged in the report, para 7.7, that significant excavations will be required to provide the landscaping parking area, and the proposed conditions around this and the boundary treatment are welcomed to give adjacent occupiers some reassurance. In summary, however, I think the impact of the changes proposed, including the added rear projection, are unacceptable. It's an overdevelopment of the site. I hope you'll refuse it and let the 7-flat scheme proceed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do officers have anything further they wish to add? No. No? Okay, fine. Okay. I can't see anybody indicating on this one. I have to say, I think the changes, with all due respect to the referring ward councillor, are minimal, so minimal that I'm just happy just to move approval.
Thank you very much, Chairman. In my opinion, this site is an overdevelopment and it is going to have a detrimental impact on the vicinity. It came to this committee a while ago, as we've heard. This committee approved it. I didn't support that approval last time. Having said that, what we have before us, the bulk and massing is marginally larger, but not tremendously larger. So, because it's been approved previously, there are very few grounds for refusal. But it does just strike me that this is an additional unit for profit. It's not providing any additional bed spaces. It's not providing any additional need for housing, etc. in the borough, and I won't be supporting it.
Okay. Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to respond to Councillor Howe's comments about the design access statement. I think it's very, very well made in terms of the comments. We need to make sure that planning submissions are accurate and they deal effectively with the scheme that is before us. If there are, certain applicants put many applications in, and it's not appropriate, in my view, that, and I agree with you, that it's so easy to cut and paste bits of submissions. What I think this council should expect and might expect are submissions that deal with the matters before on individual sites, and we are talking with applicants about that across the piece. So I just wanted to make members aware that we very much appreciate those comments, and we will take those on board. Thank you.
Yes, it's regrettable on one level that design access statements aren't a formal planning document as such, and it would be certainly I think a benefit to the planning system if they were. Okay, Councillor Khan.
I would just like to second approval, Chair.
Okay, anybody else wishing to speak? Councillor Khan?
Yeah, I'll be supporting this because I can't see much difference between the last one, this one, and we are gaining one more flat, so I am going to support it.
Okay, Councillor Chatterjee.
Yeah, it's really the concern about the which the objecting councillor made about the loss of another family flat. Talking about a loss when, of course, in comparison with what has already been granted, because, of course, at the moment there's a house there, but not all the flats that are being proposed, and the flats have already been granted. But of those, one of them will be not come to fruition because it would be, if we're granting this one in the end, will be another one-bedroom flat in addition to, instead of a second two-bedroom one.
Okay, fine. Right. Okay, we've just got the one motion, though, before us for approval, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Khan. Can I see those in favour of approval? 6. And those against? 3. And abstentions? 1. Okay, thank you. Well, that application is then approved. I'm sure Mr Mwanza will take away the comments on the design nexus statement.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. But before we disappear, just to say, unfortunately, very sadly, it's Margot's last planning committee with us. She's been here supporting the committee for, well, I don't know how many years, actually quite a long time. Yeah, and she's done I'm sure we all agree, an absolutely brilliant job and will be a great loss to us here on planning. Personally, she's been a huge support and everything I've had to do with as the chair, particularly trying to get this blooming thing to work a lot of the time. Thank you very much, Margot, and you will be sorely missed, and we wish you all the best for the future. Thank you.
Can I second your comments, Chairman? Margot's been a great support to all of us over the years, and it would be a great shame to see her go. So I hope she enjoys a rest and doesn't have to deal with all this nonsense and enjoys the rest. And perhaps she might record a vote of thanks in the minutes for herself for the work that she's done over all the years. Thank you.
I think that would be entirely appropriate. Please, Margot, if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be most appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've very much enjoyed doing planning, and I shall miss you all. Thank you.